A very warm welcome to all of you. My sincere thanks to Jaivi Johal and the Avatar Foundation for this opportunity. I'd also like to thank Alliance Francaise for generously providing us with the space. My special thanks to Anita Patamkulam and A.S. Panniselvan for their support and for their faith in me, an artist engaging with history, and for many discussions that shaped and strengthened this work. I thank Harini for her research and for creating the PowerPoint presentation. And finally, my heartfelt thanks to each of you for being here today. It is a privilege and I'm deeply grateful for your presence. In today's lecture, Constructing an Institution 1850 to 1928 is the first in a five-part series on the Madras School of Arts. I will begin with an introduction, followed by an outline of the cultural and institutional milieu that preceded the founding of the Colonial art schools. I will then trace the early formations of the Madras School through the roles played by Alexander Hunter, Robert Chesham, E.B. Havel, before concluding with a discussion of W.S. Hadaway and his students. When we encounter a work of art, it often evokes a complex response of wonder, bewilderment, and curiosity, accompanied by an unquenchable desire to seek answers to fundamental questions concerning the meaning of life. Paul Gauguin's painting, Where Do We Come From, What Are We, and Where Are We Going, symbolizes the role of art in fostering contemplative engagement with humanity's unending quest for meaning and completeness. Where does an artwork begin? Does it emerge solely as an expression of an individual's free will, or is it a collective effort? Antonio Gramsci's assertion that pure spontaneity does not exist in history offers an useful framework through which to understand artistic production as a historically embedded process rather than an isolated act of individual inspiration. Artistic practice is shaped by historical, social, scientific, philosophical, and cultural conditions that inform the artist's consciousness and creative choices. What appears as individual spontaneity is, in fact, mediated by collective experience and the inherited knowledge of skill, material, aesthetics, and systems of meaning. In India, we live within the simultaneity of tribal, folk, classical, regional, modern, and postmodern worlds, straddling multiple identities where diverse temporalities, aesthetic traditions, and cultural epistemologies coexist and intersect. For an Indian artist, it becomes imperative to understand the period one belongs to, what one represents, the role one plays, and where one stands within the complex and often perplexing crossroads of Indian artistry. Such critical self-situating enables the artist to engage consciously with inherited traditions while responding to present conditions, thereby negotiating both historical continuity and contemporary change. As an artist working from Chennai, my practice is located within cultural and geographical context encompassing South India, Tamil Nadu, and the city of Chennai. Alongside the specificities of period, gender, class, and caste, all of which shape how I see, make, and interpret art. Art education, both formal and informal, has played a significant role in the development of my practice. Trained at the Madras School of Arts in the 1990s, I carry forward the concerns of that period, its pedagogical methods, material conditions, and artistic grammar, along with both its possibilities and its limitations. Although situated on the busy EVR Periyar Road, just a short distance from the Central Railway Station, the Madras School of Arts feels like a refuge. Once one steps onto the campus, the building along the periphery frame a large open space at the center of the campus. Architecturally, the campus is a mixture of colonial and modernist styles. The colonial era Indo-Sarsanic building formed the northern edge of the campus. The painting and sculpture departments, library, museum, principals, and the administrative offices belonged to this earlier phase of construction. Newer modernist buildings were added in later periods to accommodate newly created departments. Exposed brickwork, wooden staircases, high ceiling, old furniture, decorative pots, faded mural, and sculptures from various periods lie scattered across the campus, becoming remnants of accumulated memory. As a former student, when I stepped into the institution, I am enveloped by a sense of familiarity and a feeling of temporal status. The Madras School of Art, being the first colonial art school to be established in South Asia, has a long but fragmented historic documentation. No documents or archives survive within the institution. It is a place where spirit takes precedence over the body. Knowledge is carried through lived experience, oral transmission, and embodied practice. The absence of an artistry department makes it difficult for the institution to develop its own voice or to consciously preserve and interpret its past. The academic writing on the Madras School of Arts has at best been limited, with few scholars outside the institution engaging seriously with its history and practices. By contrast, there exists a considerable large body of work on the Madras Art Movement of the 1960s. Improved documentation by artists from that period onwards has played a crucial role in enabling the construction of its historical narrative. Yet the period preceding the 1960s remained largely obscure. Spanning more than 100 years from the colonial era through the pre- and post-independent India, the institution has moved through numerous transitions in pedagogy, material practices, and ways of thinking about art. These shifts and the school's role in shaping artistic development in India remain only partially understood. Tracing these threads of connection becomes essential, not merely to reconstruct a history, but to reflect on who we are, what we inherit, and where we might be moving. I'm moving on to the next part of the lecture, which addresses the cultural and institutional milieu that existed prior to the establishment of the colonial art schools. The idea of India or Indianness, as we understand it today, was largely shaped during the 19th century through colonial administrative practices. Through colonial administrative practices, Orientalist scholarship, institutional framework, and emerging nationalist and reform movements, leaving an imprint that continues to inform how we imagine ourselves. The East has long held a profound fascination for the West. From artists, writers, and antiquarians to scholars and the general public, this fascination produced a vast body of works. Painting, literature, studies of religious and mystical philosophy, linguistic and textual research, archaeological excavation, travelogues, ethnographic accounts, museum collections, and exhibitions. This fascination is closely connected to what Edward Said observes as Orientalism, which can be understood as the cultural and geographical imagination of the West. He says, historically, this imagination has represented the East as exotic, mysterious, backward, and fundamentally different, portraying the Orient as a timeless and unchanging, as if it exists outside the flow of history. Orientalism in art can be seen in the works of two types of artists. The first group, primarily based in Europe and closely associated with Romanticism, portray the Orient as an exotic, heroic, sensual, and driven by unbridled passion. The second group consists of traveling European artists who drew inspiration from direct encounters with the East. Eugene Delacroix's paintings such as The Death of Sardana Palace, Fanatics of Tangier, and The Massacre at Chios portray the Orient as a site of irrationality, cruelty, and emotional excesses, marked by violence, chaos, and a sense of uncontrolled intensity. Delacroix also made a few closely observed studies of a visitor from Calcutta in 1825, which shows an openness to be engaged with actual presence and experience rather than relying purely on imagined Orientalist fantasy. The second group of Orientalist artists consists of traveling Europeans who came to India driven by adventure, intellectual curiosity, and professional opportunity. Some were also formally invited by colonial authorities. For instance, William Hodges was invited by Warren Hastings to document the landscapes and the monuments of India. He remained in the country for about 4 years, from 1780 to 1783, and later published Travels in India in 1793. Tilly Kettle was one of the first British artists to work extensively in India, arrived in Madras in 1769 after securing permission from East India Company. Over the next decade, he established a successful portrait practice across Madras, Calcutta, and Faizabad. Paintings of British officials such as Warren Hastings, as well as Indian rulers including Muhammad Ali Khan of Arcot and Sujah-ud-Dawla of Awadh. He also made a small number of studies depicting Indian court life and performers, offering early European visual encounter with Indian society. Among the many British artists who traveled to India in the late 18th century, Thomas Daniel and his nephew William Daniel stand out as the most significant. Arriving in Calcutta in 1786, the Daniels spent nearly 7 years traveling extensively across India, producing a vast body of sketches, watercolors, and oil studies of landscape, architecture, and monuments. On their return to England, they transformed this material into the celebrated series Oriental Scenery, comprising 144 aquatints published in 6 parts between 1795 and 1808. Created to present India to an English public, this monumental project became one of the most influential visual account of the subcontinent, helping to construct a visual idea of India that has persisted, subtly shaping how the country continues to be seen and represented even from within. Robert Home. Robert Home was a British portrait and history painter who worked in India from the late 18th century. He travelled in the Mysore region, joining Lord Cornwallis after the fall of Bangalore in 1791, and documented the Third Mysore War. Among his most well-known oil paintings are the death of Colonel Moorhouse and Lord Cornwallis receiving Tipu Sultan's sons. In 1794, he published Select Views in Mysore, the country of Tipu Sultan, a collection of 29 copper engraved scenic, historical, and architectural plates. Thomas Hickey was an Irish-born itinerant painter who arrived in India in the late 18th century after working in Europe and the Middle East. His first stay was in Calcutta. On a subsequent visit, he travelled to South India during the Fourth Mysore War, where he painted the members of the Mysore royal family and scenes of court life. Around 1800, Hickey settled in Madras, producing portraits of company officials and local elites, including a well-known portrait of Colin Mackenzie. He remained in Madras until his death in 1824. Ethnographic and flora and fauna paintings in colonial India, produced mainly in the 18th and 19th century, were central to how this subcontinent was visually known and classified. Created under East India Company patronage by European artists and naturalists, as well as Indian painters working within company network, these images presented themselves as objective records while operating within colonial systems of ordering knowledge. This visual language later shaped museums, archives, and art education in India. Orientalists, Indologists, antiquarians played a central role in shaping 19th century ideas of India through their engagement with texts, monuments, and material remains. The translation of a Sanskrit text by William Jones, together with the founding of the Asiatic Society in Calcutta in 1784, established a scholarly framework for understanding India's past. In parallel, archaeology began to emerge as a systematic discipline, recalling, though on a far more expansive scale, the rediscovery of classical antiquity in Europe. The rediscovery of Ajanta caves in 1819, James Princeps' decipherment of Brahmi script in 1837, and the excavation of Amaravati Stupa by Colin Mackenzie and Walter Elliot between 1816 and 1845 marked a growing attention to India's architectural and material heritage. Mackenzie's extensive collection, assembled over nearly 4 decades in India as the first Surveyor General, fed into emerging institutional archives in Madras and other colonial centers. This momentum continued with founding of Government Central Museum in Madras in 1850 by Dr. Edward Balfour and culminated in Alexander Cunningham's surveys and excavation of Buddhist sites across the subcontinent, leading to the establishment of the Archaeological Survey of India in 1861. Together, these scholarly and institutional practices produced the conditions through which India's past was visualized, classified, and studied, shaping the intellectual ground from which art education in colonial South India would later emerge. By mid-19th century, education had become a matter of state concern, shaping the conditions under which institutions such as the Madras School of Art came into being. Let us briefly look at the key interventions and policies that shaped modern India. The Charter of the Company, 1813. This charter renewed the East India Company's rule in India but marked a turning point by introducing state responsibility in Indian education. It allocated 1 lakh annually for promoting education, literature, and science among Indians. Though implementation was limited, it opened the door for British intervention in Indian education policy. Macaulay's Minute 1835. Written by Thomas Macaulay, this minute argued for promoting Western education in English over traditional Indian learning. The minute directly influenced colonial education policy, leading to adoption of English as the primary medium of instruction in higher education and reshaping intellectual, cultural, and administrative life in colonial India. Wood's Dispatch, also called the Educational Dispatch of 1854. The foundational policy for modern education in India, it proposed a structured, state-supported system with a hierarchy of institutions from primary to university level. It promoted secular, Western-style education, encouraged vernacular instruction at the primary stage, and led to the establishment of universities in Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras in 1857, as well as education departments in each province, formalized state involvement and supervision in education, marking a shift from Oriental to Anglicist policies. Against this broader intellectual and educational climate, we can now turn to the founding of the Madras School of Art and the figure of Alexander Hunter and his successors. The archival detail of this section draws on Deepali Diwan's doctoral research on the Madras School of Arts. Dr. Alexander Hunter, founder of the Madras School of Arts, was born in Chittagong into a family that has been established in India for 3 generations. Trained in both medicine and art, his education in anatomy, physiology, draftsmanship, and fine arts in Edinburgh and Paris reflected the close interrelationship between art, science, and medicine that characterized early 19th century intellectual culture. Hunter was a person of considerable artistic talent that are evident from some of his drawings from that period. Appointed assistant surgeon in Madras in 1843, Hunter was stationed at Chengalpat, where he introduced prisoners to better methods of paper making and pottery, from sourcing the material to execution. This early engagement with material processes and instruction played a formative role in shaping his ideas on practical art education. These ideas found institutional form in 1850 with the founding of the Madras School of Arts, established as a private initiative in Broadway, then known as Blacktown. At the opening of the School of Art, Hunter articulated its founding principles. I have long been of the opinion that a school of useful and ornamental arts was much wanted in India, and I think few will deny that. If properly established, it may lead to beneficial results. I know that I'm taking a bold step in this attempting single-handed to set going an institution of this kind. But I bear my humble testimony to the incomparable benefits which noble institutions of this kind confer not only on the countries which support them, but on the world at large. A prevailing view among colonial administrators and scholars was that India had once achieved a high level of excellence in the decorative arts, but had since declined, a position that Hunter largely shared. This belief shaped his understanding of art school's role. As he noted, the artistic section of the school was meant to improve the taste of the native public and make them familiar with the beauty of form and finish in the articles daily in their hands and before their eyes. And he spoke of creating among the native population a taste for humanizing culture of fine art. Taken together, these remarks outline twofold aim of the school: to improve the quality of artistic production through better materials, techniques, and design, and to cultivate public taste through everyday objects. Aesthetic experience was thus framed as a means of social refinement and moral uplift, with art education positioned as a tool of shaping both material culture and the sensibilities of societies at large. The school initially functioned from the ground floor of Hunter's residence. Within its first year, enrollment has reached 180 students, with instructions offered in drawing, painting, modeling, lithography, wood engraving, and copper etching. I'm just giving an idea of the timeline of Alexander Hunter's period in Chennai. So just you can have a look at this. In 1851, an industrial design section was introduced, modeled on the Government School of Design founded in London in 1837, reflecting Hunter's awareness of contemporary design education models in Britain. The same year, at the Great Exhibition of the Works of Industry of All Nations, held at Crystal Palace in London, the Indian section attracted widespread attention for its art products. Pottery works from the Madras School of Arts received a prize, and from this exhibition onwards, South Asian art was increasingly positioned as a model of good design. Over 200 Indian objects were acquired through a government grant for use in British schools of design, later entering the collection of South Kensington Museum. Owen Jones of 6,000 rupees for the purchase of books, tools, and models. Casts from Greek antiquity, European architectural ornaments, painting, and illustrated books were acquired from London for use in artistic section of the school. 2 years later, in 1854, the Madras School of Art was bought under the government control, placed under the Director of Public Instruction. Hunter was exempted of his medical duties, appointed superintendent of the school, and provided a regular salary. A monthly grant of 600 rupees was allotted, and the institution came into direct association with South Kensington College, and continuing through the 1850s and 60s to receive apparatus of art education, including designs for tools and furniture appropriate to an art school. In 1856, photography was introduced as a formal subject of instruction. Hunter recognized photography as both a vocational skill and a pedagogical tool, useful for employment, for study of historical design, and for documenting and circulating knowledge of South Asia's visual past. He made representations to the government for appointment of a photography instructor and secured the services of the government photographer Captain L. Tripp. Photography soon became a primary means of studying India's artistic heritage, with students undertaking weekend photographic excursions to art. In 1857, the school was relocated to its present site on what is now EVR Periyar Road. By the end of the decade, between 1850 and 1858, approximately 1,760 students had received artistic and industrial training at the institution. The student body was diverse in age and background, comprising European settlers, Anglo-Indians, and native students. The conditions that would sustain the institution through lectures, writing, exhibitions, and constant engagement with government and patrons. This commitment was evident in his publishing activity, beginning with the Madras Art Journal, 1850 to 51, followed by the Illustrated Journal of Art, and later the Indian Journal of Art, Science, and Manufacture, through which he sought to shape a public discourse around art, industry, and education. The Madras exhibition of 1855 and 57 were initiatives of the government, with Hunter serving on the organizing and jury committees. Madras School of Arts participated in the exhibition through displays of printing, pottery, marbles and limestone, and building materials such as bricks and paving blocks, situating the school within a wider governmental framework linking art education to material and industrial production. In 1857, Hunter founded the Madras Photographic Society, extending this project of institution building beyond the school itself. Separate science from art, but understood them as mutually sustaining forms of knowledge, each enhancing the instrumental value of the other. He emphasized the importance of mechanics and chemistry in understanding the inherent nature of things and their universal principles, an approach that informed his sustained interest in the use of local resources and the idea of a self-reliant society. Geological excursions and the systematic collection of specimens fed directly into the school, where materials were processed and applied in development of art manufacture. Hunter kept through records of the availability and the cost of resources, ranging from clay-around Madras for pottery and bricks to fibrous plants for paper making, marble for lithography, gypsum for casting, and wood for engraving. Meticulous observation drawing from natural objects from South Asian historic past form a central pedagogic practice. Within the art school, drawing occupied a privileged position as the foundation of all artistic work, a legacy that continued to shape Madras School of Arts narrative to this day. Hunter's account of the early experiments in silver chasing at the Madras School of Art in an article he wrote in the Art Journal offers a clear sense of his multifaceted approach to building an institution. Design education began outside the classroom. Excursions were conducted around Madras, where students collected shells, plants, and objects of natural history. They were systematically drawn, named, classified, and studied as a source of form, forming a visual archive from which design could emerge. Within a year, over 200 species of shells had been collected and documented. This material was then translated into applied design. Prizes were offered for new designs for silver salt cellars derived from the shell drawings, encouraging experimentation and innovation. A winning set of design by a teacher at the school was later etched, reproduced at low cost, and circulated to other institutions. These designs travelled further still, finding their way into production under the patronage of the Maharaja of Travancore, where they generated significant economic return. What began as a pedagogical exercise thus moved seamlessly into manufacture and circulation. Hunter's vision also extended to materials and infrastructure. The discovery of high-quality gypsum near Ennur provided crucial enabling the production of plaster molds and the preservation of wax models for casting. Further searches encouraged through public notices and rewards led to the identification of gypsum deposits across South India. Its availability contributed to the refinement, expansion, and reduced costs of several art industries, benefiting not only the school but silversmiths, brass founders, and decorative practices more broadly. Taken together, these practices reveal Hunter's conception of art education as an integral system, linking observation, classification, design, material knowledge, and production. The Madras School of Art was then shaped not simply as a site of instruction, but as a carefully constructed ecosystem in which art, science, industry, and public utility were closely interwoven. Within the fine art section, training was oriented towards naturalism. Hunter's commitment to academic realism also reflected prevailing colonial assumptions about artistic ability and the perceived lack of skill and intellectual discipline required for such modes of representation. Influenced by Sir Joshua Reynolds and the academic tradition of the Royal Academy, Hunter upheld classical Greek art as the highest aesthetic ideal and sought to model the students in the industrial sections were trained in a range of material techniques, including metalwork, casting under using plaster of Paris, brickmaking, pottery manufacture and printing, all grounded in local methods and resources. Over time, the Madras School of Art became a significant site of production. It manufactured bricks and firebricks for iron and coke furnaces, potter's kiln, and bakehouses, eventually emerging as one of the largest producers of bricks in Madras Presidency. Its output extended to perforated veranda and cornice tiles, Italian roofing tiles, plain and glazed pantiles, coping and ridge tiles, drainage and water pipes in earthenware and stoneware, encaustic paving tiles, and telegraphic insulators. The school also provided garden and architectural elements, flower pots, fountains, tazas, gateways, balustrades, cast iron benches, terracotta ornaments, alongside work in design, engraving, and printing. Through this range of production, the school contributed both materially and aesthetically to the civic architecture and built environment of Madras. So these are some of the objects that was produced in the Madras School. And in this illustration shown in the slide, I have given two models to understand Hunter's pedagogy. One linear, this one is linear, and the other one is non-linear. So the idea of this model is to understand how he constructed pedagogy. So it basically starts with the lower one is where where he collects raw materials and understands the availability, local availability. Then comes the process and technical usages. Then documentation of visual past, and then it turns into instructions, and those instruction becomes designs that we saw earlier, and then above that comes, because for Hunter, he believes that the believes in the fine art, like he believes the Greek classical art as the highest aesthetic ideal. So that comes at the top. So the artistic section is placed above the industrial section, and the greatest thing that could they achieve is in fine arts, and that is a linear one, because Hunter being a modernist, early modernist. Then I also thought this model might also be something which could work in the sense how both the departments were interlinked and feeds into each other. So you have you have on one side you have discoveries, process, techniques, and documentation that goes to pedagogy. Then comes then it is used both in industrial design section and the fine art section. From the fine art section, they develop individuality, or they become creative, and that leads to fine arts. The industrial department, it goes, and then one can become a craftsman, and it goes into production, or where they can find employment. So this is the sort of two models that I created. So I can keep this now. Okay. Early sources offer some insight into how classes were conducted and how the syllabus was structured. Instruction followed a clearly graded progress, moving from two-dimensional drawing to three-dimensional works, and from copying illustrations and models to drawing directly from nature. This progression reflected a distinct aesthetic and pedagogical hierarchy, from geometric form to natural objects and ultimately to human figure. Training began with the copying of geometrical ornaments set by the teacher, gradually advancing to painting in color from cast or animal statues, with careful attention to light and shadow. These stages were designed not merely as an exercise in imitation, but as a culminative process through which students eventually expected to synthesize acquired skill and move towards invention of new designs. Classroom-based instruction marked a departure from the traditional master-apprentice system. It was framed as a more efficient model, economizing time and allowing instructions to be delivered systematically to larger groups. A more detailed syllabus is available from the period of Robert Chisholm, particularly under instructions in the drawing department. The syllabus was divided into 5 stages. Stage 1 focused on linear geometry, mechanical drawing from measurement, linear perspective, and detailing of architectural drawing. Stage 2 introduced freehand drawing of form from outlined examples, enlarged and reduced, as well as freehand drawing of the human figures in outline from copies. Stage 3 progressed to freehand drawing from models, first in outline and then shaped in sepia, along with chalk drawing of the same objects. Stage 4 involved outline drawing from the round using pencil and chalk drawing of the full human figure from cast, and live drawing of the draped figure. The final stage consisted of painting in monochrome in oil and watercolor, painting in color in oil and watercolor, and the exercises in time sketching in both monochrome and color. It was not compulsory for students to complete all 5 stages, and certificates were issued at the completion of each stage. Students training as draftsmen or lithographers were not expected to proceed beyond the 2nd stage, while those specializing in wood engraving or plate engraving undertook a supplementary course of instruction after completing the 4th stage. By 1860s, the Madras School of Art had moved beyond its role as a regional institution and began to function as a central node in the colonial system of art education. Hunter's advisory role to the government was already evident in the early 1850s, when he was consulted during a discussion surrounding the establishment of an art school in Bombay. This consultative function expanded significantly in the following decade. In late 1866, at the government's request, Hunter undertook an extensive tour of art schools that had recently been founded or were in the process of being planned across the region. These visits involved meetings with officials, assessment of students' work, and the survey of local conditions, particularly the availability of raw materials. Hunter proposed that the Madras School of Art function as a central resource for drawing instructions, curriculum models, design materials, and trained teachers. Students trained at the Madras were subsequently appointed as instructors at institutions in Calcutta and Jaipur, while schools in Travancore, Bangalore, Nagpur, Jabalpur, and Sri Lanka benefited from its instructive and institutional support. In this way, the Madras School of Art came to operate as the head of a centralized system of art education, loosely analogous to South Kensington. The early teaching staff of the Madras School of Art reflected both in its experimental character and its colonial framework. Among the first instructors was J.J. Fonseca, an Italian artist settled in Chennai. Chesterfield and Humphreys were appointed as glaze firemen and later replaced in 1855 by Alfred Jones. Mr. Archibald Cole, associated with the Marlborough House, played a key role in engraving, working alongside D. Garrick on illustrations for Hunter's journal. By early 1860s, the school increasingly adopted a system in which European instructors were supported by pupil assistants, often graduates of the institution itself. In many cases, an European teacher was paired with a native assistant, as seen in wood engraving class, where J. Duarte was assisted by Thiruvenkatachari, a former student of the school. Indian artists also began to take on teaching roles. P. Murugesan was appointed instructor in anatomical and botanical drawings. Maria Das headed the class for copper plate engraving, and Ayasami Pillai, a native photographer trained under Captain Tripp, was employed by the school. Hunter retired in 1873, having laid the foundation of an institution that has benefited generations of artists. Nearly 176 years on, the Madras School of Art continues to shape artistic education and practice. Robert Chisholm was appointed Superintendent of Madras School of Art in 1877. A pioneer of Indo-Saracenic architecture, Chisholm positioned the school in close alignment with the architectural ambition of the colonial city. Under his leadership, the institution was actively involved in producing architectural ornamentation for several major civic buildings in Madras. Chisholm treated the industrial section of the school as a functional workshop, aimed at making artisanal labor practical and economically useful. Students were employed in public building projects, where training in decorative art was directly linked to civic construction. While reinforcing academic realism in fine arts, he used industrial section to train students in applied ornament suited to architecture. His commitment to technical skills extended to stained glass. Chisholm traveled to England to learn the craft himself, which was subsequently introduced into the school curriculum and prominently deployed in his civic architectural projects. It was also during his tenure at the school. It was also during his tenure that the school's institutional infrastructure was consolidated. The previously rented premises were purchased, and Chisholm was entrusted with designing and constructing new buildings for the school. The Gothic arched facade facing the road, museum, painting blocks, sculpture section, and the administrative and the principal's offices were all planned and built during this period, giving Madras School of Art much of its enduring architectural identity. These are some of the buildings designed by Chisholm, and most of the decorative work were done by the Madras School of Art students. And these buildings in the college was designed and built by Chisholm. E.B. Havel was appointed Superintendent of the Madras School of Arts in 1854. Trained at the South Kensington School of Art and School of Art and Design, his education in London coincided with the emergence of art and craft movement led by William Morris, which idealized the hereditary craftsman as central to the revival of handicrafts. These ideas profoundly shaped Havel's approach to art education in India. At Madras, Havel reorganized the institution along the lines of a craft school, placing Indian hereditary craftsmen as at the head of various departments and modeling instruction on an apprentice-based system. Under his tenure, the presence of practicing craftsmen within the school increased significantly, and the fees were waived for the sons of craftsmen to encourage their participation. The Indian craftsman was thus positioned as the key figure in the Colonial art education project. Havel undertook extensive tours across South India, documenting towns and cities known for their craft traditions. Objects collected during these travels entered the school museum, where they served to sensitize the students to indigenous visual traditions. During this period, the school's pedagogical focus shifted decisively towards India's own visual past as the primary source for art education, and classical Greek models were removed from the museum. Havel's intervention Havel's intervention was driven by three interrelated aims. First, the reevaluation of traditional Indian art and its positioning as high art within international canon. Second, a revision of British art education and patronage policies to support living yet neglected Indian craft traditions. And third, revitalizing of modern taste and style through engagement with indigenous forms. So these are the traditional craftsmen working at the College of Arts. W.S. Hadaway, an American artist trained at the Museum School of Fine Arts in Boston, served as superintendent of the Madras Government School of Industrial Art from 1907 to 1927. Building on E.B. Havel's move towards an Indian-centric pedagogy, Hadaway played a decisive role in reorienting the institution away from the colonial craft training towards a model that integrated South Indian tradition with arts and craft principles. A specialist in illustration, jewelry, and metal design, Hadaway restructured the curriculum around hands-on production. Students were trained in jewelry, furniture, wood carving, metalworks, textiles, and printing, drawing directly from regional practices such as temple sculpture, brasswork, and Tanjore painting, batik dyeing, handloom weaving. Indian motifs and techniques were emphasized over Western academic imitation, aligning the school with broader arts and craft ideals. Central to this approach was the employment of master artisans from centers such as Ramanath, Kumbakonam, and Visakhapatnam, who introduced students to Shilpa Shastra based design principles. Hadaway also expanded departments in block printing and weaving, assembling extensive teaching collections. His publication, Cotton Paintings and Printings in the Madras Presidency, 1917, and Illustrations of Metalwork in Brass and Copper, mostly South Indian, 1923, documented and legitimized regional practices within institutional framework. By end of his tenure, the school had evolved from its mid-19th century origin under Alexander Hunter into a leading center for culturally grounded vocational art education, shaping both artistic landscape and craft economies of the Madras Presidency. Two students trained under Hadaway came to shape the public visual landscape, one through monumental sculpture and other through popular art. M.S. Nagappa, a sculptor based in Madras, was trained at the Madras School of Art under the principalship of W.S. Hadaway. Specializing in clay modeling and lost wax bronze casting, his practice translated traditional sculptural techniques into large-scale public monuments suited to colonial and princely commissions. His major works included the bust of Diwan Bahadur S. Subramaniam, installed at the University of Madras in 1927, the bronze statue of King George V, commissioned for Silver Jubilee celebration in 1935, an achievement that earned him the title Rao Bahadur, and the statue of Maharaja of Travancore. These works exemplify a sculptural language combining academic realism with technical precision, characteristic of British era monumental sculpture in South India. This visual language was continued by his family well into the early 21st century, coming to dominate public monuments and shaping the visual imagination of civic space in this region. Kondairaju occupies a significant place in the history of South Indian calendar art. Born into an artisan family traditionally engaged in painting temple walls, gopurams and festival cars, he joined the Madras School of Art in 1916 and studied there until 1918. Acquiring formal training, and after leaving the art school, Kondairaju worked as a set designer and backdrop painter for drama company Sri Original Madurai Meena Lokshani Bala Sarguna Sabha, traveling widely across India and Sri Lanka with performances drawn from the Ramayana. When the Sabha closed in 1942 at Koilpatti, he established his own studio, first Ambal Arts and later Devi Electrical Studios, where he produced paintings and undertook photographic retouching and print work. With the rise of mechanized calendar printing in Sivagasi in the 1950s, Kondairaju became a key illustrator for major presses in Madurai and Sivagasi, including Sri Kalaimagal. Drawing on South Indian traditions such as Tanjore painting and local mythological imagery, Kondairaju translated temple aesthetics into mass-produced prints. In doing so, he played a pioneering role in shaping Indian calendar art, bringing the sacred imagery into everyday domestic spaces. Rao Bahadur N.R. Balakrishnan, a graduate of the School of Art in the 1889 and was later appointed as a teacher in the institution in 1894, and who went on to become its first Indian superintendent in 1927, serving until his retirement in 1928. That same year, a young Devi Prasad Rai Chowdhury assumed charge of the institution, bringing with him an energy and vision that would decisively alter its course, marking a shift from a predominantly craft-oriented model towards a renewed emphasis on fine arts. It is this transformation and the new directions it set in motion that will form the focus of the next lecture. Thank you. Thank you so much.